we play for blood. Somewhere along the way, I lost a step. I got sloppy, dulled my own edge. Maybe I went and did the worst crime of all. I got civilized. So now, we zero the clock. Just me in this no-name world. Gotta find that animal side again.
Welcome back. David Penn here to the Professor Penn podcast. This is episode number 127, Peace March to the Fed. Peace March to the Fed. Hope you're well. Hope you had a good holiday weekend. It's always very eventful when you're involved in politics. Lots going on. I'm pretty good. I'm glad to be here. It's the 9th of July, 7:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, Tuesday night. I went on this peace march to the Fed, and there's so much rich history being made and so much understanding that's reached. And there's an old saying, you don't really know someone until you fight with them. And well, this is a political fight, so I'm getting to know some people. In fact, some of them are watching me now. I'm noticing some of the worst scum of the political world are following me now because they're looking to trip me up. And when I say scum, they're entitled to their opinions. I'm becoming less patient with the people that are either evil or brain dead. And that's something I have to work through myself because, I want to maintain um, my own spiritual center. And I'm confronted with people that are just truly evil. They may not even understand they're evil. They probably think they're good, and like me, they're a mixture of good and evil. But what they're doing politically, which we're going to talk about tonight, is truly siding with evil. And I'm going to say they probably don't understand it. That's why there's that great scripture, forgive them, Father, because they know not what they do. Some of them do know what they're doing, but most of us are just waking up. We really don't know the history, the philosophy, the energy, the religious aspects of what's going on. And that's why we're doing the podcast together to try to explore this. And tonight we're going to explore it through this peace march to the Fed. Uh, Good morning, Tanner. How you doing, man?
Morning, David. I'm doing great.
Do you know Riddick?
No, I've never seen.
Oh,
I know Vin Diesel, but I've never.
oh, you never seen the Riddick series? There's 3
No,
Riddick movies.
I've never even seen like I don't know, not even a cover. I saw that was my first
You
time
know,
seeing Vin
your
Diesel like
movie
that.
catalog of movies that I suggest you watch is growing so quickly
Yeah.
that I'm going to give up until you at least watch The Godfather. Riddick is great. Riddick is it's not a classic movie. It's a movie that takes some of the most important themes that we're dealing with in modern society. Uh, it's a hero movie. Riddick is a hero, and he's a killer. He's an animal, but he's a man who fights. Uh, he's portrayed as an anti-hero, but whose violence and whose actions are just. He's caught up in an evil system, and he's doing his best to survive and to thrive in that system. And the reason I played that clip is he makes this comment that he'd lost a step. He dulled his instincts. He had committed the worst sin of all. He became civilized. We need to think about that because we've got the Darwinian impulse, the survival of the fittest on the one hand, and then we have love your neighbor as you yourself wish to be loved on the other hand, the yin yang of life. And we're trying to sort that out. It oscillates back and forth between tyranny and freedom. And all the rest of the dichotomies are just a cover story to get us caught up in tribalism and hatred and delusion and illusion. But the real issue is what is freedom and what is determinism. And we're working on that as a culture. I'm working on it as an individual. Uh, it's not a simple uh, it's not a simple journey to try to reach that answer for myself. The movie makes it simple. He lost a step, and he's going to zero the clock and rediscover his animal self. And if we keep going the way we're going here in the world, we're all going to be doing that pretty relatively soon. So we want to, as American citizens, uh, consider what are our elected leaders doing? Where are they taking us? Which is why we went on this peace march to the Fed that was led by Minnesota GOP endorsed senatorial candidate Royce White. So we're going to use that peace march as an opportunity to discuss these issues and just take a look at what's happening generally. Just generally. Uh, Let me pray. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for creating the light and the dark. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for creating me in your image. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for making me an American. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for making me free. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for healing the blind. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for feeding the people. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for releasing the bound. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for raising up the downtrodden. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for creating the heavens and earth. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for providing for all my needs. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for directing my path. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for my American courage. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for crowning America with glory. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for restoring strength to the weary. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for sending your Son to die on the cross that I might be saved. Forgive me, my Father, for I have sinned. Pardon me, my King, for I have willfully transgressed, for you pardon and forgive. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds, who is gracious and ever willing to forgive. I choked up there because, as I'm reading and I'm multitasking, I'm thinking about my own search for truth and how I get hung up in certain snares and traps, which we're going to talk about tonight, and how I'm trying to work through those things because this political life that I'm on right now, which is not a life that I chose out of a desire to be political, but I was thrust into it because of the world and its condition. And I'm just now willing to sit and watch and self aggrandize while everything goes to hell in a handbasket. I just can't do it. And of course, in my own camp, Mrs. Professor Penn thinks I've lost my mind because she just says, hey, why don't we just go get ours? And why are you taking this time away when you could be taking care of the family? And uh, that's also an issue. The impulse to look within, to withdraw, to just take care of your own. It's a strong impulse. But I just couldn't sit on the sidelines. And I found myself marching downtown Minneapolis on July 4th, which was, not dangerous at all. But the way it was fenced was, oh, it's great danger, which we're going to talk about. Uh, but I just couldn't stay isolated and self-concerned. And of course, when I move out now and I'm involved with all these ideologies and all these people, mostly I'm starting to not feel good because I'm in interacting, like these people that are watching me right now. I think you're assholes. I really do. But if I walk around thinking you're an asshole, I'm going to be the victim of my own thinking. So I'm not going to think you're an asshole. I'm going to think about my search for truth. And that is my only insulation from the unwellness that comes with interacting with very negative energy. And there's a lot of negative energy that's been let loose in our society, in us as people. We're trying to study that together. And if we're going to save this republic, we are going to understand that energy, learn how to transform that energy. And the answer to that is right in the founding documents of our country and the historical culture upon which it rests, the search for truth. And the idea is republicanism. And I don't mean with a little r like the Republican Party. I mean the philosophy of republicanism, which is almost completely forgotten and has been replaced by the New World Order or the Democrat liberal order. So republicanism as a philosophy has been overturned by the Democrat liberal order. And we're going to understand that because we have a chance to say, without hating each other, that that was a failed experiment in human consciousness and restore and reboot the original impulses of this country, which were extraordinarily liberal. Republicanism is extraordinarily liberal as compared with the political ideology which it essentially overthrew, which was the divine right of kings. But what happens in politics and in history is that things seem to be defeated and to go away, but then they rebrand and come back as something else. Like we had communism. Well, it didn't work. So we're going to call it liberalism. It didn't work. We're going to call it progressivism. It didn't work. And now we're going to rebrand back to communism. It's like the divine right of kings was overthrown by republicanism. It's rebooting and being rebranded as billionaires, oligarchs, human beings just like me, just like you, biologically, that seek to rule over us using their alliance with the government, which has enriched them They found business activities which are in concert with what the government, with the Democrat liberal order seeks to achieve, and they become famously wealthy. In fact, one might say that this symbiotic relationship, they actually created the Democrat liberal order as the Democrat liberal order created them. And they have phenomenal power, and they're manipulating things. And when I say they're manipulating things, they're making us hate each other and hate ourselves, divide and conquer, as Cardinal Vigano so eloquently shared with us in a clip I ran on the last episode. So hence we had a peace march to the Fed, because the center of that divide and conquer philosophy, that reboot of the British business model, kingship, which we've been talking about, the divine right of kings, the monarchy, the empire, has been rebooted in the modern financial system, which is run by and which is essentially the Federal Reserve. So we marched there as American citizens. We're going to talk about that. Before we talk about that, I'm just going to read some ideas into the record as a predicate for going forward. We've talked about this. These are ancient ideas about pride. Pride. Because in pride in our own intellect, in pride in our own technology, in pride in our own technique, in pride in our own power, we've in great extent lost the search for truth. When pride comes, then comes disgrace. But with the humble is wisdom. One's pride will bring him low, but he who is lowly in spirit will obtain honor. The fear of the Lord is hatred of evil. Pride and arrogance and the way of evil and perverted speech I hate. If you're listening to this and a shoe fits, wear it. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Before destruction, a man's heart is haughty, but humility comes before honor. By insolence comes nothing but strife, but with those who take advice is wisdom. Do you see a man who is wise in his own eyes? There is more hope for a fool than for him. In the pride of his face, the wicked does not seek him. All his thoughts are, there is no God. It is better to be of lowly spirit with the poor than to divide the spoils with the proud. A greedy man stirs up strife, but the one who trusts in the Lord will be enriched. Whoever belittles his neighbor lacks sense, but a man of understanding remains silent. That one's for me. Pride goes before destruction. I'm reading this again because this is critical. And a haughty spirit before a fall. It is better to be of lowly spirit with the poor than to divide the spoils with the proud. We're going to talk about these people today extensively. Once a man had a case and came before a judge. This is a lead into the news that matters because there's a lot of legal issues going on. Supreme Court is very active suddenly. We need to track on that. It's very critical. But we must start out with, once a man had a case and came before a judge who ruled in his favor. Upon leaving the court, he said, there is no judge in the world like this one. After some time, that same man had another case before that same judge who this time ruled against him. Upon leaving, the man cried, "There is no judge more foolish than he." And the people chided him. Yesterday praiseworthy and today a fool? Hence the search for truth admonishes, you shall not revile a judge. And that's a segue into the news that matters. There's a lot of very important Supreme Court rulings that are coming down. I know you've probably heard some of them or paid some attention to it. The judges that stood on the authority of the search for truth would fail as humans. They became corrupted as humans. But the people were admonished to respect the judges because they were part of the co-creators of the world. Their rulings mattered. They resolved conflict and maintained peace. Their work came out of an ancient tradition which saw human beings as spiritual beings, not as inventory. When we look at the Supreme Court judges, they're wearing black robes. The judges, if you go to family court in a black robe, black robe, that seems a little religious, doesn't it, Tanner? People wearing black robes?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I guess I can see the connection, but I don't know the history of why judges wear what they wear.
Well, let's think about different groups that have worn black robes over time. You know, priests wear black robes, don't they? Don't the priests wear in the Catholic Church, don't wear black vestments? I think they do.
Yeah.
Don't executioners wear black robes?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this black robe thing is a symbol. We're talking about symbols on the last episode. There's a lot of meaning in those symbols. So our Supreme Court justices, all the way down to the probate court judges, the traffic judges, they're all wearing these black robes as a symbol. They're hearkening back to the 5,700-year tradition that underlies the United States of America. It doesn't mean that their rulings or their jurisprudence necessarily have anything to do with the search for truth. One of the reasons I read all those philosophy about pride is I don't know how many of these judges stand on the search for truth and how many of them stand on the rule of law, disembodies or divorced from the search for truth. And I would say that the failure of our judges to maintain their connection to that tradition which underlies republicanism might have something to do with the related and concomitant disregard that we as American citizens show for our judges. So not very long ago, the right, because this is this artificial left-right, let's hate each other thing, divide and conquer, the right was hating the rulings of the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court and the courts in general were not looking at issues of their concern. And the left used that as evidence that what the left was doing was beyond reproach. Now, the judges have issued rulings, which we're going to talk about, which are not supportive of leftism. So before the right was screaming the judges were horrible, now the left is screaming the judges were horrible. Well, it's that same person. It's we the people. So on the one hand, we think the judges are great, and on the other hand, we think they're awful. You know, if the judges were rooted, their jurisprudence was rooted in the search for truth, such criticism would be counterproductive. And to the extent that we still have judges who take their work seriously, who attempt to be judges, such criticism is caustic and degrades our culture and our politics. Just does. But we have all kinds of judgments. Judge not lest you be judged, such as we have the greatest legal system in the world. Do we? Or are we just afraid to look at our law schools? You know, if everybody's getting less well-educated by going through school, and this I can attest to, they call me Professor Penn because I come out of that background and I enjoy sharing ideas with you. But that has nothing to do with why I say this. I just sent 5 kids through the school system from kindergarten, and the youngest one is going to university in the fall, University of North Carolina. Full scholarship. Great. Don't have to pay for this one. Because my argument is to my family, this education is so bad, I don't want to pay for it. So we had big fights about that around the campfire. And my youngest one, who's pretty darn smart, said, "Hey, watch this. She got a full scholarship. Hey, nothing to argue about. Congratulations. Congratulations." But I'm watching these kids, my kids, and it's very evident to me that they're not nearly as well educated as my generation was. Not that we were particularly well educated, but in comparison, I mean, these kids are not being well taught. So wouldn't it by extension mean that the lawyers that graduate from our law schools or the teachers teaching in the law schools are less refined, less educated than those that came 30 years ago or 60 years ago? I mean, this is an argument. I'm not saying I'm right or wrong. I'm just saying it's an argument that I'm making affirmatively for myself anecdotally. I don't know if it's true in the broadest sense. Because, if you go back far enough, those judges were affirming slavery. So, these things are complex, need a lot of sorting through. Can't just take a stock answer off the shelf. But overall, it's my opinion that people are less well educated today. That would mean the lawyers are less well educated. That would mean the judges are less well educated. They certainly have an opportunity to stray from the search for truth and fall into the pride that comes with the human ego and the human intellect and start to view their actions unmoored from 6,000 years of human history. And that, my friends, I think is quite dangerous. U.S. regulatory agencies will lose authority. The Supreme Court reduced the power of the executive agencies by sweeping aside a long-standing legal precedent. They endangered countless regulations and transferred power from the executive branch to the Congress and the courts. The precedent, Chevron versus the Natural Resources Defense Council, one of the most cited in American law, requires courts to defer to agencies' reasonable interpretations of ambiguous statutes. There have been 70 Supreme Court decisions relying on Chevron, along with some 17,000 in the lower courts. So this is a shifting of power from the administrative state to Congress and the courts. It's a windfall for lawyers. Hey, what a surprise. But the lawyers were the ones making the decisions in the administration. So I guess some higher paid lawyers are going to get to make this decision now through the court system, these administrative decisions. It was a big deal, and I just want to summarize it. There was an ideological vote. It was 6-3. Justice Kagan, a leftist, wrote the dissenting opinion. I love this. Kagan responded that Chevron was vibrant and valuable. Quote, "It has become part of the warp and woof of modern government, supporting regulatory efforts of all kinds." This is Kagan. This is a quote. I love this. To name a few: keeping air and water clean, food and drugs safe, and financial markets honest. Really, Justice Kagan? You want me to believe that Chevron and the administrative state is keeping my air and water clean, my food and drugs safe, and my financial markets honest? All that pops to mind is, and it's not a great metaphor, but, the inmates should not run the asylum unless the doctors are mass murderers. In this case, she's so ideological. Maybe she believes it, but our air and water are not clean. They're not, because administration after administration has told us what clean is, and it's not. We're being poisoned. My opinion. Food and drugs safe. Hey, we can improve there. Financial markets honest. Hey, I'm in that game. Anyhow, we're going to try something different now. These disputes that arise in these areas are going to go back into the court system. And they're going to go back to Congress. Congress writes a lot of legislation that is intentionally vague for two reasons. They know the administrative state will provide the answer, or B, it'll go into the legal realm, and a lot of their buddies, I meant to look this up. A lot of our elected officials are lawyers. They have a predisposition to help that industry. Isn't that fair? The Supreme Court went on and ruled that President Trump is immune from criminal charges for official actions. Again, on a 6-3 ideological vote, the court ruled that former presidents enjoy immunity from criminal prosecution for conduct involving official acts during the tenure in office. This will mean that President Trump will not, very unlikely he will be tried by the special prosecutor before the election. So the left is going wild about this, just wild. Calling for the packing of the court, the impeachment of the justices, the same court that just gave them all the rulings they loved after the 2020 election. See, this is a little disingenuous. You can't be good today and bad tomorrow. You're either bad all the time or good bad all the time as an institutional body. It's an institution of governance. If we want to change the court and make it a better body, let us look at our law schools and our educational system. We've got a long road ahead of us to restore republicanism here in the United States of America. But, if you go back and take a look at it, man, there was kings and queens for several thousand years until the Republican 5,000 years until the Republican philosophy swept this globe and liberated the people mostly from the diktats of familial rulers or hereditary rulers. That's almost gone. Still got some vestiges. Almost gone. The Tories were crushed in a landslide victory for Labour in England. The Labour Party won a landslide victory since I saw you. Very important because Labour crushed the conservative movement there as far as what the press is reporting. So I had, leftists coming to me and putting into my X feed, ha, ha, ha. Because it was reported as a great victory for Labour. And it was a great victory for Labour on paper. Labour took 412 of the 650 seats in the House of Commons. The Tories, the Conservatives, only gained 121 seats. But Labour's victory was based on only 34% of the voters. The big winner in that election, the big winner was Nigel Farage's nationalist movement, very similar to the Trump movement or the nationalist movement here in the United States. Farage's movement took big chunks of that right-wing conservative vote. We're going to talk about that. It's going to be a big part of tonight. These conservatives, we ran into it on the vote and on the march to the Fed. Here it is right here in England. Nigel Farage's party picked up only 4 seats, but huge progress in terms of their support. So this is fenced in England as a huge victory of the Labour, which is really the communists. No, it's a rebranding. They're communists. They want the communist agenda. Let's just quit. Let's quit mincing around with their labeling, like the Democratic Party here. They're communists. That's what they want. Okay, let's be clear about it. Then we can get in what's the difference between communism and capitalism. Not very much. It's just who's got the cash. Is a small group at the top going to have the cash? Or are all the people going to have a shot at the cash? Things like that. We can work into it on a future podcast because that's really worth understanding. But it was really fenced very disingenuously in the press. It was really a victim of a victory. Well, the Tories were a victim. They were a victim of the rise of the Reform Party. That's the UK's most successful populist party. So we'll have to watch that because this is an act in many plays. I'm going to stay with you as long as I can. We're going to keep trying to tell the truth. We're going to keep up the search for truth. Since I saw you last in France, whoa. What happened in France was that the pundits had predicted a victory of the populist movement there, the Rally Nationale, led by Le Pen, kind of similar last name, like it. An interesting thing happened in that French election. There's three groups there, and I'm going to say this because this is very similar to what's going on here in the United States. For the Michael Broadcorps and the Dustin Grages, this is to let you know who you are. Because I know who you are, and when all of us know who you are, and I'm talking about the quote-unquote DeSantis conservatives in the Min GOP, the Nikki Haley conservatives, the conservatives that don't like people who swear, that support the U.S. military, whatever it does, that like the status quo. They want to just see it tinkered with and maintained. Low taxes, low regulation, a strong military, and the rest of it, hey, whatever we got to do as long as we stay in power. That's who these people are. Maybe they wrap themselves in the cloth of faith and they're pro-life. Could be. A little strange to be pro-life and then be pro-military at the same time. A little contradiction you might think about. But looking at France as a model for what's going on. We had three groups in the French election. In France, they don't kid around. They just call themselves communists. Vive la France. We'll give them an A+ for honesty. They're communists. The center left was Macron's group, the ruling party. The center. Center left, center right, there's no difference. They're the same people. They're the people with the 401ks. The 401k crowd, the 501c3 Christian crowd. That crowd right there. And then on the right was the Nazis, the racists, the xenophobes, the homophobes, the Rally Nationale, which is the way they've been branded for decades. And of course, there are people in that group that are all those things. So that's why I've said many times about our national movement here in the United States. If you are an anti-Semite or a racist, homophobe or a xenophobe, the American Nazi Party is right on down the block. Get out of here because we will not prevail if we allow the other 2/3 of the population, because the numbers are about the same, to be brainwashed into believing that Professor Penn, American-born Jew, is a Nazi. Can't prevail. Or I'm an anti-Semite. Because they'll say that about me. I'm an anti-Semite. We're going to talk about that just in a little bit. But these three groups in France were facing off. It was the final conflict. And the pundits believed that the Rally Nationale would prevail. But an interesting thing happened on the way to the forum. And the same thing's happening right here in the good old United States of America. Those center people, they call them center left in France. We call them center right here in the United States. In fact, that reminds me, I'll be spending my evening with a group of these people tonight. I will not be with you in the live chat. Please excuse me. Please carry on. Please make the flame grow. Bring people. Do you have your lists of 20? Please, we need to build this movement. Because look what happened in France. They didn't have enough people. They did not have 50% plus one on the national movement. They didn't have it. So those two groups, the center and the left, made a deal. Instead of having 3 candidates in every state in France to fight to see who had the most support, one candidate on the left and in the center dropped out in every state, aggregating all the votes, center votes and left votes, to the candidate that was left. And guess who won the election? Do you know who won that election?
Tell me.
The communists won. France is now a communist country, like Mexico. And the first thing that the communists did once they got the baton in their hand is they demanded that President Macron resign. We'll talk about it more on Thursday. This is so similar to what's going on here. So for all of the people in the Republican Party who are, I don't like swearing. The military, all these people that have all these reasons they don't like the national movement. Oh, these people are stupid. They believe in God. They're cultists. They're Nazis. They're anti-Semites. All the labeling that goes in to take the people that love their country of France or love the United States of America, love the search for truth. Those knuckle draggers. The center dislikes those people so much because of their own self-hatred, because they're really wrapping themselves in the cloth of faith and country, God, country, family. That's how they fence themselves in their own self-image. But actually, what they really want, it's all about me. That's what they want. They don't care about their fellow citizens. They want low taxes and low regulation so they can get over and leave everybody else to eat cake, like Marie Antoinette. So the center in France sided with the communists, and the center here in the United States is siding with the communists. And if we can't get to these white liberals, as Malcolm X said, the most dangerous people in this country is the white liberal. Well, the white liberals are all communists now, okay? So they're no longer, it doesn't quite work like it used to. The white liberals now are, guess who? The Republican traditionalists, the Reagan Republicans. I bet you didn't know you were a white liberal, did you? Well, you are. You're a white liberal. You're the most dangerous person in this country, and you are the swing voters. And I'm going to keep talking about this so every one of you understand, because I know you're watching me. I'm going to help you understand the history of politics here in this country and how our movement was perverted after World War II and how the conservative movement became conserving, not of 1776 and Republicanism, but as David Frum said, conserving the best of the Democrat liberal order. So we're all liberals, and we're not really political liberals. We're actually social liberals. And why do I know that? Because I'm your age, because I grew up with you. So when these women say to me, oh, I don't like Royce's swearing. He swears too much. And yes, I'm making fun of you. I am, because it's ridiculous when we're about to lose the country to a communist revolution that's going on all over the world. And we're going to sit here and talk about somebody swearing who has the courage to walk the streets of Minneapolis, which you don't have. You weren't there. Our streets have been turned over to the communists. Is that what our founding fathers? Oh, yeah, here, Britain, just take it. No, they stood on the bridge. They stood in the breach. So we need to go through this as Republicans. Republicans, that's a word, right? It's a political party. No, it's a philosophy of life. And that is a very liberal political philosophy. But we, the boomers, we gave that up. We adopted the social liberalism of the 60s because just like getting all the money for ourselves, getting all that sex for ourselves worked just great, didn't it? So all the people my age that are, yes, I know there's some very good people. They were chaste. They were religious. I know it. I know it, and I know some of these people. And God bless you. The other 99% of you, stop lying to yourself. You're drug addicted, sex addicted fiends. You're social liberals. You're not political liberals. You're social liberals. You're focused on your own craven desires as it applies to money, which you want to accrue to yourself. Why do you want it? Well, you might not be too good looking, so you know if you have money, you can get laid. It's just that simple and ugly, isn't it? That's why you want to look out at other people like me and hate me. Because you don't want to hear this truth. But let's meditate on it. Let's search for truth. Let's take that last vestige when you're sitting in the pew for an hour on Sunday. Let's contemplate what it really means to be in that church that has that pride flag hanging there. Let's really contemplate what's going on here. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels stated in the Communist Manifesto that the first step in the revolution by the working class is to raise the proletariat to the position of the ruling class to win the battle of democracy. See how important you are? You're the swing voters. To win the battle of democracy and universal suffrage being one of the first and most important tasks of a militant proletariat. The battle of democracy and universal suffrage. Marx wrote in his critique of the Gotha program, quote, between capitalist and communist society there lies the period of the revolutionary transformation of the one into the other. Corresponding to this is also a political transition period in which the state can be nothing but the revolutionary dictatorship of the proletariat. Back to my comment about law schools. Marx allowed for the possibility of a peaceful transition in some countries with strong democratic institutional structures, like the United States of America. We're voting our freedom away. France voted its freedom away. But he also suggested that in other countries in which workers cannot attain their goal by peaceful means, that's a quote, attain their goal by peaceful means, the lever of our revolution must be force. Stating that the working people had the right to revolt if they were denied political expression. And, this is where things get pretty murky, because isn't that what it says in our Declaration of Independence? These people are smart, right? We cannot go by without a little trip into the Ukraine. President Zelensky has outlined a workable model for peace talks with Putin on Monday, but on Tuesday he rejects the idea of a ceasefire. So he's getting a little schizophrenic under the pressure of his collapsing army and his faltering prospects. When you're looking at getting killed, you start to get a little, being brave, like going downtown. That was not brave, by the way, let me just say. Walking the streets of Minneapolis was not brave. I never had a second thought about it. But I know people called me and they were worried about it. He's worried about it. So on day one, it's let's have peace. On day two, now let's keep fighting. But President Trump came out and said he sincerely wants to end the war in the Ukraine. And President Putin acknowledged that. And he said at a news conference that he has no doubt that President Trump is sincere and that the Russian people will support Trump's efforts. Could you please play number 2?
Well, the fact that Mr. Trump, as a presidential candidate, says that he's ready and wants to stop the war in Ukraine, we take that very seriously. Well, I haven't seen his ideas on how exactly he's going to do that, and that is the key question. But I have no doubt that he says that sincerely, and we support that.
Now, President Trump or any politician, Royce White, any of them, they're not going to perfectly reflect what I seek in a politician. But when it comes to the core issue of peace, that's good enough. Could you please play number 3? And I'm going to preface this by saying this is why I don't support Ron DeSantis, because what he wants to support is that center, which is allied with the communists. Please play number 3.
I think that he's been a threat for a long time. You know, Clinton tried to work with him, Bush tried to work with him, Obama tried to reset. Trump was very positive about Putin. And I think that reality is set in, that this is not going to work out that way. And you're better off dealing with Putin by being strong. I mean, you know, we've tried to deal with some of this in the Congress. A couple years ago, we authorized lethal aid for Ukraine so that they could resist.
Great. So, you know, Clinton, Bush, Obama, all the time, we put all this time into talking about how NATO was incurring on the Russian border, all the effort that was made to isolate Russia, all that wiped away. Putin's unreasonable. DeSantis is all in for force. Great. Ron, get a job at Disneyland.
Just put
Or-
the fries in the bag.
What?
Just put the fries in the bag.
Put the fries in the bag. I like that. I like that. That could be a new T-shirt. Put the fries in the bag.
that's internet talk. That's
Is it
the new
really?
saying is
Thank you for
if
updating
someone
me.
says something dumb, just put the fries in the bag, bro.
That's great. And you know, his supporters think it's great, this is who we're going to have to talk to now. So I'm going to try to modify myself spiritually and not dislike these people because they're just like me. Because I remember being up at night watching the U.S. tanks roll across Iraq when President Bush attacked Saddam Hussein. And man, I couldn't sleep. I was so excited. I thought it was great. So there I was, a purveyor of the status quo in alliance with the communists, and I didn't know it. Now I know it. I know it. Many of the people in this audience know it. We got to get out to our friends, our family, our neighbors, who are center left and center right, and do not understand that they're in alliance with people that will kill them. In fact, on Thursday, I'm thinking about playing films of communist firing squads, where they just, people that, hey, you were in the Republican Party, line them up and shoot them. That's a quick way to take care of problems. There's re-education, but why re-educate people if you can just kill them and start over? That's the communist model. And we better wake up because they're not kidding around. We are. Got a lot of news I can't get to today. I want to get to the heart of the podcast, which is the March for Peace. The March for Peace in Minneapolis, which was held on July 4th. Tanner, could you please play number 4?
The first time I started my campaign at the Federal Reserve, they said that I was a debt hawk and that I was, dog whistling anti-Semitism because I was at a place where a lot of Jewish elites actually run the Fed. Bernanke and, there's a long list of them. So you can't mention the Fed because if a Jewish person works at the Fed, now you're anti-Semitic. However, you can send your money to a country that killed 33,000 Jews in 3 days with small arms. You know how much you gotta like killing to kill 33,000 people in 3 days with pistols? You gotta like it. You gotta enjoy the work. I don't even think you see that we're so desensitized to numbers. 33,000 people. If we had this rally here today and there was violence for some strange reason and one person died, the entire American media would say it was completely unacceptable. 33,000 people were killed in 3 days with pistols. Those are the Ukrainians we're sending money to now. But you're supposed to tear down your statues of George Washington because he owned slaves 200 years before that? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. The logic doesn't square. And that's why they're afraid of me, because I'm logical. I'm logical and I'm thorough. That's what this campaign is about. And it's about you as well. And you have to embrace that logic, that thoroughness. Don't let them tell you these bullshit narratives anymore.
I'm going to just start with this one because it was a brilliant point. That was Royce White, the one and only GOP-endorsed candidate for Senate here in Minnesota. Early voting has started. Ha, ha, ha. Please, if you're in Minnesota, get out the vote. Get out the vote. Vote in the primary. So few people vote in these primaries that they don't even really reflect the will of the people. Well, they do, because the people don't care. It'd be nice if 100% of eligible voters, American citizens that were eligible to vote, went to the polls in this primary and actually voted. What's the point of the deal? Well, that's just ballast. That's inertia. So if you're an activist, if you're in the party, please let's go out and get people to vote, because this kind of honesty and this kind of historical insight is not part of our political dialogue. And this is why Royce White is branded as an anti-Semite, or people go, I can't vote for him because he swears. Because this is a very profound intellectual idea, and I want to just elucidate it, because this is rare, this kind of thinking. First of all, Royce was at the Fed, and he said that you can't talk about the Fed because it's run by Jewish elites. Okay, that's true. We're going to read the news article where they brand him as an anti-Semite for saying it. But here's 3 Jews that recently ran the Fed: Yellen, Bernanke, and Greenspan. This is the recent history of the Fed. It's been run by Jewish people. Now, I don't know if they believed in God or not. It's not my place to judge them on this podcast. But they were elites. They were graduates of our elite institutions. They were credentialized. They were economists, highly educated. They're elites. That's what it means to be an elite, to start out with. You're educated. You got a PhD. Okay, you're an elite. Like you're an elite athlete. You play in the NFL. You're an elite athlete. That's the difference. If you play in the NFL, you're elite compared to the guy that's playing on Sunday at the local park with his buddies. It's not the same animal. Two different levels of skill. So I've got these elite, educated people who happen to be Jewish, who do run the Fed. Therefore, you can't talk about the Fed without being branded as anti-Semitic. That was a very valid point. We're going to read how the press fenced it, that Royce is an anti-Semite. And Michael Broadcorp's watching me. He's going to make comments about this. He's actually following me now. Well, Michael, let me tell you, they're Jewish and they're educated. That makes them Jewish elites, and they did run the Fed. It doesn't make Royce an anti-Semite for pointing that out. He's saying that when he talks about the Fed, he can't talk about it because he's branded as an anti-Semite or a conspiracy theorist, because it's been run by a group of people. So they use those people to wall off any conversation about the Fed. And then the American citizens don't even know what the Fed does or how it functions. It's our central bank, and it's a private bank. How does it work? What does it do? And we marched to the Fed to try to unpack that, to start that process. But the point that was so eloquent, we can't wage war without the Fed. Why? Because we have to borrow the money to wage the war. And where do we get the money from? Well, the Treasury can issue bonds, which is a piece of paper, and I can buy that bond, and it says the government will pay me back with interest within a window of time. So I give them money, they give me paper, and then over time they give me my money back plus an interest, a profit. But sometimes, and as the dollar gets weaker and weaker and our country gets more and more conflict-orientated, the people that buy these bonds, because we're talking about trillions of dollars, institutional investors, they don't have that much demand. They're saying, maybe I'll pass. And when that happens, the Treasury sells that piece of paper to the Fed. And what does the Fed give the Treasury? Not money that's earned with sweat and blood and productivity and creativity. No, they create the money. They go, press the button, and $1 trillion shows up. And that's the money that's used to wage these forever wars that started under Bush in 2003. In fact, since 2003, the Fed has given Treasury almost $10 trillion, or a third of our debt, in monetized, created fiat nothingness. It's just a scam. We don't know that as American citizens, because guess what? We still got to pay it back. The bankers that created it will get paid back with the sweat and blood of David Penn and all the people that I work with and everybody in this society. That's pretty intense. So Royce wants to talk about that. That's why we went to the Fed. And we couldn't let this war be waged in the Ukraine. We couldn't finance it without the Fed contributing that monetization of debt. So Royce makes a very eloquent point. He's talking about Babi Yar, the greatest single mass murder genocidal event in World War II, where Ukrainians, they were Ukrainian Nazis, under the watchful eye of the German Nazis, slaughtered with small arms fire 33,000 of their fellow Ukrainian citizens in 3 days in Kyiv, right in the capital city where Zelensky has his headquarters today. And Royce's point is fantastic. There are these allegations that there's Nazis in the Ukraine. Putin has said he's trying to denazify the Ukraine. There's all this warp and woof back and forth. Are there Nazis? No, there's not. Yes, there is. No, there's not. Royce just takes it to the next level. We know that there was Ukrainian Nazis at Babi Yar during World War II, which is not that long ago, 75, 80 years ago. But we're supposed to accept that our government is backing up the Ukraine. But at the same time, the very same time, 248 years ago when the country was founded and George Washington was the first president, we're supposed to tear his statue down because 248 years ago, he had slaves. And Royce said, look at this logic. That's why they don't like me. And that's why I like Royce. And that's why people don't like him. Because this kind of logic, this kind of investigation, this kind of search for truth overturns the narrative. You can't have it both ways. If we're going to say that there's no more Nazis in the Ukraine and it's a democratic country and we're supporting it against totalitarian tyranny foisted upon it by Putin, and there's no Nazis there 80 years after World War II, okay, can we quit criticizing the founders of the country 248 years ago? How can you have it both ways? Either you're going to hold people and countries accountable for the past acts of their leadership decades or hundreds of years ago. Either you're going to do that or you're not. Either you do it or you don't. It's one way or the other. But what Royce is saying is, hey, contradiction. That's why we marched to the Fed. Well, here's how a guy named Mark Wasson, who I said hello to, I was very kind to him. Never occurred to me that he would be writing the article that he did. I'm going to read his article and talk about it. A rally in March on Thursday for Republican U.S. Senate candidate Royce White drew about 24 people. I didn't think of it as a rally for Royce White. I thought of it as a peace march on the Fed, to the Fed, which a senatorial candidate showed up and spoke. That's how I thought about it. Because I've been advocating for peace marches right here on this podcast for months. Drew a mixture of about 24 people, supporters and security guards. The rally moved on foot from a downtown park to a spot outside the Federal Reserve Bank in Minneapolis. A low-energy crowd. No, we were not low energy. We were respectful and walking through the streets of Minneapolis with dignity. We were high energy. There was a lone counter protester showed up with a sign that read Trump equals felon and people tried to talk to him, he disappeared. White, at 6'8" and visibly wearing body armor under his clothing, led the march through Minneapolis' St. Anthony Main District, less than a mile to the Federal Reserve Building on Hennepin Avenue. Loudspeakers on a truck carrying a variety of flags regaled those gathered with the voice of Steve Bannon, whom White considers a friend. No, he doesn't consider him a friend. They're friends. The relationship between the two has become fodder for White's detractors. Yes, it has. Here he characterizes Bannon as a far-right podcaster and former member of the Trump administration who was recently ordered to begin a 4-month prison sentence for defying a congressional subpoena. Okay, true. Both Bannon and White promote a form of national populism, which outlines hardships placed on the public, such as high prices for groceries and housing, while also condemning what they call outsiders in various government entities they say cause those hardships. That's completely made up. I've never heard that before. I've never heard them say, either Royce or Bannon, that outsiders means not Americans, are in various government entities. No, we're saying that our government is riddled with globalists. They're not outsiders. They're us. They're we the people. We have a sickness here that we have to solve. Quote, your children and your grandchildren will be serfs. That's why they locked up Steve Bannon. It's the only reason they locked Bannon up. And that was Royce talking about the speech that was being played through the speakers, where Bannon talks about the economic conditions of the country. And I know if I ask Tanner about how he feels about his economic prospects and the prospects of his generation, he's already told me. Are you all still the doomers?
Yeah, well, I haven't heard that term in a while, but yeah, that's the Gen Z.
Right. No hope.
Yeah.
No hope,
No
right?
hope.
No hope.
No, there's so many people. I mean, I'm starting to turn my friends around. I'm trying to get them to turn their thought process, and I think just with maturity that happens naturally too. But I still have a lot of people that they will just straight up say, "What's the point? It's going to end up exactly how it is. So for now, I'm going to drink my beer, smoke my weed, play my video games. I'm going to be happy because my life is probably going to be way worse in 10 years."
You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. That would be the tagline of the World Economic Forum. We'll have to pull it out again so we can remember it. White also told the crowd that Jewish elites run the Federal Reserve and that the bank is responsible for the current war in Ukraine, a country that engaged in the Holocaust while under occupation by Nazi Germany in World War II. He really didn't get to the heart of it. Michael Broadcorp immediately put up that Royce White was an anti-Semite. This is unbelievable how these people are. Their ability to misperceive is legendary. Royce described the bank as being the heart of corruption. Well, I have to tell you, we owe $35 trillion. $10 trillion is made up money, and I have to pay it back. Hey, you know what? If I could go counterfeit to run my life, wouldn't that be cool? Because the Fed is the only group in the country that legally can create money. When I do it, it's a crime. I go to jail. So when they do it, it's all good. There's a little contradiction there. Let me say this again. If the Fed creates money out of nothing and we have to pay the Fed back for that money, that's good. But if I create money out of nothing on a printing press in my basement, I'm going to jail. That's kind of a contradiction. But you're supposed to tear down your statues of George Washington because he owned slaves 200 years before that, White said. It doesn't make any sense. The logic doesn't square, and that's why they're afraid of me, because I'm logical and I'm thorough. Okay, put that line in there. We need to contemplate it. During the speech, White also told his followers that Democrats want to reprogram MAGA Republicans. That's true. We can play that right here. We can play 20 Democrats from Hillary Clinton on down saying, that we need to be reprogrammed. Part of the speech, White also condemned Republicans, calling the party, along with Democrats, uni-party cucks, a favorite insult of White's. Following White's endorsement at the Minnesota GOP state convention earlier this year, the campaign between White and challenger Joe Frazier has taken an ugly turn. Both camps have come out swinging against each other, with Frazier calling White unfit for office and White calling into question Frazier's motives for running. Well, Joe Frazier, if you're watching, you promised the delegates that you would abide by the convention's endorsement. You didn't do it, and all the people, the Gazelkas, the Colemans, the Boschwitzes, the Bensons, all these people that have come out and endorsed you are destroying the Republican Party. Why? Because the Republican Party now, based on that vote, is being transformed into a people's party. So you'd rather take a blowtorch to this party and destroy its relevancy than allow the party to evolve and have it be a quote-unquote populist. What all that means is the people, the non-elites, the regular people like me, are participating. You know, the people say, make fun of me because I'm not a real professor. Oh, blow it out your ass, okay? That's just to get you to do that. If the professors were so smart and so good, why are all my kids coming back communists from college? And why are we in all these wars if these experts were so expert? Oh, let's look at it the other way. Maybe they're getting exactly the result they want. That would mean they're evil. So you tell me, are they stupid or evil? You tell me, because that's where we're at. We're going to have to figure it out. In a response to a video of White condemning Frazier, Frazier's communication director, Preya Samsunder, said that she was genuinely concerned for this man and suggested White has mental illness. You know, this is the classic discrediting of a human being who's in the public square. First, they're either an anti-Semite or a racist. Those are the two biggies. Homophobe, a little bit less so. There's still a lot of homophobia that hasn't been worked out. But we almost pretty much agree. Well, maybe we don't. There's a lot of anti-Semitism on the rise. But, you know, they've said White is an anti-Semite. They've said he's a racist. But, you know, when all else fails, just say he's crazy. But see, Royce is way ahead of you, Sam Sunder. Royce's podcast, Please Call Me Crazy. He embraces you being unable to understand him because you are the swing voters. The swing voters. If you're watching me and you're in the Republican Party, or you are a person of relatively my age, say 40 to 70, close enough, right? And you got a 401k and you go to church on Sunday, and you're looking at all this and you're going, oh, President Trump, he's a felon, and he slept with that porn star, and now they're letting Amber Rose address the Republican National Convention. And wow, these people are just terrible. I want you to remember all the dope you smoked, all the people you screwed, all the times you lied, all the sins nobody knows that you committed because you never got caught. See, I had a mentor of mine who taught me there's only the caught and the uncaught. So Royce has been caught. He's got some history, and you want to use that against him. But you got the exact same history. Isn't that a little bit disingenuous? You know, I want to post up all the material that I know about you people. And why don't I do it? Because it's just beneath me. I don't want to do it. I don't want you to do it. I want this to stop. This politics of character assassination is just meant to divide us, to keep us in conflict with ourselves and each other. And if you're open to this and you're in this cohort of swing voters, the most important swing voters, recognize that they're destroying people's characters because they never want you to really look into what these leaders are saying to us. Like, how can we tear down George Washington and not forgive his sins of owning slaves, yet forget that the Ukrainians killed 33,000 Jews in 3 days, and there are still people alive that were there, that my family was killed there, and my father and my grandfather told me about the screams and deaths of their close family relatives. How can we be like this? They don't want you to think about this. They don't want you to think with your head. They want you to think with your heart and go, oh, he swears he's no good. You know, that's a way for me to project and put on someone else. Really, it's called creating a power animal. I'm putting on someone else all my sins and projecting them outwardly onto them and saying they're bad so I can feel good about myself. But I know what you did, ladies. I was there. I know what you did, brothers, to those ladies, because we were there together. So how can we judge against people when we did the same? We're still trying to work out our own salvation. And we want to go blame other people for the very things we did ourselves? There's a thing called serial polygamy. What's serial polygamy? Oh my God. Look at these sexually profligate people. Terrible. How many times have you been married? You know, the anthropologists call that serial polygamy. How many girlfriends did you have and sleep with before you got married? How many times did you cheat on your wife when you were married? All those things. But you never got caught. You never got caught. You go to church, nobody knows it. You never had an affair that made the newspapers. Great. Great. Fraser said that voters will have time between now and August primary to properly evaluate White, and he expects them to come, listen to this, to the sensible conclusion that he is not the right candidate. A sensible conclusion? Sensible how? Sensible says who? Who says Fraser's sensible? I wonder how many girlfriends Fraser had. We don't know. I don't care. It's not relevant. I want to talk about the man's political positions. And I have been told, and I did not hear it for myself, but I've had many people told me that he said in public forums that if Russians are getting killed, he's all for it. Great. How do you square that with being a Christian? Just terrible. Just terrible. I'm trying to find one more quote from G.I. Joe Frazier here. And I don't know if I can find it. There's so much material here. But he made a bunch of really scurrilous. Oh, here it is. Look at the baggage train that here's now. This is you listening now? Please, thank you for hanging with me for a second. Look at the baggage train that comes with White. In other words, White's baggage is in plain view. We can't see my baggage. I was walking out of a Republican Party meeting last night, and people were making comments, and I said, well, hell, I'm a serial polygamist. I got 5 kids with 2 women. And those women looked at me, their eyes got big. But see, when I do it because I'm a white businessman, it's all good. Look at the baggage train that comes with White. Frazier, a Navy veteran and now banker. Like those are credentializers. A Navy veteran. It might be. He might have sacred honor. But if he had sacred honor, why did he lie on his pledge to the Republican Party to honor the endorsement? So apparently, sacred honor today, maybe not tomorrow. You know, no, sacred honor is every day, every minute of every day, every second of every minute. That's what I'm going to aspire to. And he's a banker, works at Wells Fargo. I left Wells Fargo. I used to bank there for my business. I left because the bank was so corrupt, so horribly corrupt that I took my business away from there. Think about that. Yes, that's right. I did that. He told the news service that wrote this scurrilous article, quote, he's an unelectable candidate. Oh, really? Fortune teller. He's everything from being a wife beater. No, there's no evidence that he beat his wife. There was a protective order, which happens in many divorce proceedings because lawyers know how to make the men look bad so as to bring about a better outcome for their clients. Hey, that's politics. No problem. And I'm going to tell you something right now. My ex-wife, one of them, I mean, this happens. These things happen in marriages. I could go on and on about this. I'm just going to say I've lived through this twice. And one time I was a little guilty, and the second time I was completely innocent. And it doesn't matter. The point that the lawyers want to do is to paint the man as a wife beater to get the best for their clients. And that's completely okay. That's just politics. But there's no evidence. He's just lying. My point is sacred honor. Navy veteran is brought up to say, well, this man, we can trust him. First thing, unelectable fortune teller. And not really a lie, just predicting the future. It's a cognitive distortion. He's everything from being a wife beater, not true. Deadbeat dad, not true. He's an anti-Semite, not true. He's a criminal Black Lives Matter activist, not true. That's 4 lies in one sentence. Wife beater, deadbeat dad, anti-Semite, Black Lives Matter activist. 4 lies. Okay, now, Minnesota Republicans, what do we want to elect? Someone who's honest about who they are and is searching for truth. Or someone who lies when they move their lips, but has never got caught. The caught and the uncaught never got caught. You know, Joe, if you want to come on and say that you married one woman and you loved her your whole life and never cheated on her and never stole, never sinned, you're beyond reproach. You never sinned. Well, you sinned lying them 4 times, because last time I looked, thou shalt not lie. He's right. This is just the heart of what's going on with our politics. So for you that are watching me and following me now, that are riding me, I'm giving you a free pass because I'm not going to do like this. But you know, and I know, and you need to know that I know that you know that I know. And I'm not going to do like you do, because we're going to work our way out of this horrible character assassination, which has nothing to do with the policies that undergird the future of our country. And if you're coming out of the status quo, like Ron DeSantis, and you got the beautiful family and the perfect record, Harvard, Yale, military, JAG, kids, wife, beautiful. And then you stand up there and you lie to the people and say, Clinton tried it, Bush tried it, Obama tried it. I guess we're going to have to be tough with Putin and whitewash the history of the last 25 years, 30 years, because you're really promoting the status quo. When are we going to start to look at these things? I'd rather live in the house I'm in right now, which is humble and not organized. It's cluttered inside, but it's honest and it's home. I've lived in mansions with swimming pools and tennis courts. I have. They were beautiful. And inside that home was not peace. I live in a very modest home, and inside my home right now, I have peace. I want to thank Mrs. Professor Penn for granting that to me, and I just want you to know I worked for it. So we had the Minneapolis Republicans jump up here out of nowhere. Before we had the March for Peace, the Minneapolis Republicans are a group that was formed by the Minnesota Republican Party because the Republican Party abandoned Minneapolis. We have this Senate district system here in Minnesota, and each Senate district for both the Democrat and Republican Party has a local political unit. And in Minneapolis, because the Republicans abandoned the city, they couldn't make it work. So the hierarchy here took 5 districts and merged them into one, and they call it the Minneapolis Republicans. and they created one political unit, and it's run by a man named Sean Holster, who I thought I had a fairly decent relationship with because I try to get along with people. And the campaign called Sean before this event to see if we could get his. The campaign wanted to enlist the Minneapolis Republicans in the event to strengthen the Minneapolis Republican Party because Royce is the endorsed candidate and he's trying to be a unity candidate. He's trying. And what happened? The woman that called Sean Holster got an earful of the same swearing and epitaphs that other people are accusing Royce of doing it. So swearing goes around, hey, swearing for me, but not for thee. And then Royce called him, and it was ugly, super ugly. And then this guy posts that the Minneapolis Republicans disavow, have nothing to do with the campaign. It was really ugly. I was shocked. And even bad things were said about me, which I didn't hear from Sean directly, so I'm going to let that part of it go. But I will say this. I'm not quite sure why Sean Holster and Minneapolis Republicans disavowed the March for Peace. Were they disavowing peace? Were they disavowing a March for Peace? Were they disavowing Royce White, even though he's the endorsed candidate? I'm not in the guy's head. But here's what came back to me and was said and even was fairly well delineated. Because Sean posts on X. So, he puts it in writing like Professor Penn. The idea was that if the campaign led a march for peace to the Fed in Minneapolis, it would open the possibility for violence. I thought about this. I grew up here. I've walked in the streets of Minneapolis since I've been 18 years old. I've had a couple of hairy things happen over all those years, but generally speaking, I'm not afraid to walk in Minneapolis. It's the biggest city in Minnesota. It's a beautiful city. It was July 4th. The city was deserted. The implication was that by taking that march, we're going to cause a riot. So this again was an attempt to paint Royce White as a BLM activist, which is untrue. Royce did not participate in any violent protests during that period, to my knowledge. And his protests were peaceful, to my knowledge. What everybody has told me, to my knowledge. All the reports that I've received, because I looked into it. And we're supposed to walk on the streets, and when we walk on the streets, if somebody attacks us, it's my fault for being on my streets as a lawful American citizen following the law. And if I'm attacked, it's my fault. Well, let me tell you something, Republicans. If this is our attitude, we have lost to the communists. If we don't have the courage to walk on our streets in daylight in a crowd of fellow Republicans or fellow protesters, if we don't have that courage, if we're going to let the left control our streets and the dialogue of the streets, if that's what it's going to be, get your toothbrush ready to go to the gulag because they're going to win. In fact, they've won already. They've defeated us in our minds. This is a very critical issue that I want to say to all the people that are Minnesota citizens, Democrat, Republican, left, right, up, down, center, whatever you are. We have the right to walk on our streets safely. If we don't live in a society that is safe for our children, we don't have anything. We have nothing. And I'm not doing this politics for nothing. I'm doing this so that my children can walk the streets of any American city safely. And how do we get there? We stop letting these people divide us and hate ourselves and hate each other. They're doing it exactly for this result, so that people hide in their homes, are not able to talk about politics and religion, are fearful, and withdraw from the public square so it can be dominated by tyrants that seek to overturn the Constitution and the search for truth. That's what we're doing here. We're reclaiming our right to walk on the streets. That is not a provocative act. So if that's the reason why Sean Holster, because that's what he wrote down, if that was the reason, that's a trip. That's called tripping. There must have been something else. But I'm not going to fortune tell. And I hope I can have good relations with Sean in the future, because I want to get along with all of our Republican Party officers, because I truly want to have unity. Because I'm talking to you, Sean, and I'm saying you're the swing voter. I don't know if you have kids. I think I do. I think I have this vague recollection that you have kids. Do you want them to go fight in a war? Do you want your children to be poor? We have to understand these political issues. We have to understand where we're headed, where we are. So all of these people in my party that disagree with the nationalist movement, I disagreed also. But because I searched for truth, I kept my ears open, my heart open. I kept studying and learning and listening. And I can look by the exterior that the media paints, and possibly even the shortcomings of the men and women themselves, because we all have feet of clay. What is the difference between President Trump and some politician that has nothing like that? Well, we don't know, because that person's not caught. But let's say Ron DeSantis, for some reason, is nominated by the party to be the presidential candidate in 2028. Let's say it happens. Your wish comes true. Or Nikki Haley. Every single disreputable thing they ever did is going to be front page news. And there's a ton of it. And I know it, and you can know it if you look. But, hey, they're not running. They're not a threat. So let's leave them out there as an alternative to the nationalist movement. Great. Are we going to be this dumb? I don't want to be this dumb.
All I want to know is what son of a bitch shot him is all. Was it one of them John Bulls?
Oh, no, sir. I believe the would-be assassin to be a gentleman of French ancestry, or so it would seem. I don't wish to give offense when I observe that the French are known to be a race of assassins, though they can't shoot worth a damn. Any Frenchmen in the present company are excluded, of course.
There's here a fellow by the name of Guit. G-U-I-T.
Sure as hell sounds like a John Bull to me.
Well, sir, again, I don't wish to give offense when I suggested this country should select a king or even a queen rather than a president. One isn't that quick to shoot a king or a queen. The majesty of royalty, you see.
Well, maybe you don't wish to give offense, sir. But you are giving it pretty thick. This country don't need no queens whatsoever, I reckon. As a matter of fact, when I heard about queens...
Shut up, Joe.
What the hell's wrong with you, Thirsty? This dude, son of a bitch...
Might be that this dude here is English Bob. He's the one who works for the railroad shooting Chinamen. Might be he's waiting for some crazy cowboy to touch his pistol so he can shoot him down.
Is that a fact, mister? You English Bob?
Pheasants. Let's shoot some pheasants. 10 shots. At, let's say, $1 a pheasant. I'll shoot for the queen, and you for, well, whomever. That's 8 for me and 1 for you. That comes to 7 of your American dollars.
Pretty damn good shooting for a John Bull.
Well, no doubt your aim was affected by your grief over the injury to your president.
Come on! Come on! Yeah!
That was a great scene from The Unforgiven, one of my favorite movies. Another one you can put on the list of movies you're not watching.
Yeah.
This is a short course in ethnography in Republicanism. We had a cowboy, obviously an uneducated man, who was offended by the defense of monarchy by English Bill, and they ended up shooting pheasants, and they went along their way without bloodshed. My point is that, and I made this in the last podcast, that at the beginning of this country, I don't mean the Republican Party, I mean the idea of republicanism, the overthrowing of kings and queens of the divine right of monarchy by the Republican sentiment was widespread in this country, and people were real. I mean, people were not civilized like they are now. Going back to the opening scene of the podcast with Riddick saying he committed the greatest sin of all. He became civilized. He got soft. These people on that train were living close to nature, and they wanted their freedom to self-determine. The further departure from direct and constant control by the citizens, the less has the government of the ingredient of republicanism. That's Thomas Jefferson. We must get involved. PrecinctStrategy.com. Get involved. Where's your list of 20 people? If you can, go to RoyceWhite.us. Help the campaign. Let's get off the bench and get in the game. We, the people, are ceding this freedom to the communists just by not participating. That's all it takes that's the essence of republicanism, self-governance, participation. Republicanism is not the phantom of a deluded imagination. On the contrary, laws under no form of government are better supported, liberty and property better secured, or happiness more effectually dispensed to mankind. That's republicanism. Brought to you, the idea of republicanism brought to you by who? George Washington, who they're trying to discredit because he owned slaves. It was by the sober sense of our citizens that we were safely and steadily conducted from monarchy to republicanism. And it is by the same agency alone, that would be the sober sense of our citizens, and it is by the same agency alone we can be kept from falling back into monarchy, which is happening right now. They're just not monarchs of old. It's a form change. They're the monarchs, billionaires, trillionaires, oligarchs of right now. We profess to be Republicans, and yet we neglect the only means of establishing and perpetuating our Republican forms of government. That is, the universal education of our youth in the principles of Christianity by means of the Bible. For this divine book, above all others, favors that equality among mankind, that respect for just laws, and all those sober and frugal virtues which constitute the soul of republicanism. Benjamin Rush. Those sober and frugal virtues which constitute the soul of republicanism. So you can see why they're going after the Bible, why they're going after the Constitution, because they're coming for our freedom. And why would they do that? Why would they do that? a subject for another podcast. I want to thank you very much for joining me today. We, of course, didn't get through everything. I come with these big scripts and I try to be disciplined, and it doesn't work out, you know? And I keep saying, now I understand why some of these people can go for 3-4 hours a day, because there's just so much to cover. But we really got into the issue of freedom and civilization and how it plays out right in our Republican Party here. We've got people that are really the white liberals that Malcolm X identified as the most dangerous people in our society. But I'm going to keep my heart on them, and I'm going to keep my mind open. And there are the swing voters that we need to turn if we want to prevent, like in France, the alliance between the conservatives and the left to defeat the nationalists, because they swear. You know, if we're going to do that, to keep, because as soon as the communists get control, they're going to kill all you conservatives. And you have not read your history. This has happened many times before, and it just happened in France. And I was informed, and I'm going to go get the evidence of it, that the airport in Paris, where I've been, was jammed with people leaving the country because they were terrified. Think about what that means. Because where are we going to run if America falls like France has just fallen and like Mexico fell just a few weeks ago? Well, that does not preclude creativity. Creativity is going to happen under any circumstance. It's just how bad we're going to make it before it is reborn. Because there is great artistry, and there's the great yearning to get out great art. The search for truth and creativity is the same thing. So let us not lose it, and let's go out with one of my favorite musicians, which I'm sure Tanner has never heard of this guy. His name is Tom Scott. He had a band back in the 70s called Tom Scott and the LA Express. This guy was cool. So let's just go out, after a relatively heavy podcast, let's go out with some really fantastic music. I want to thank you. I wish you well-being, and I look forward to seeing you on Thursday night. Thank you very much.
Have a good night, everybody.